Hello. So I kind of start these videos always the same way nowadays. As I say, I went and looked in some shops this morning, but I did. I didn't get anything. I didn't buy this, but I did go look in a few shops, and as is the recent pattern, didn't find anything. There were one or two. There was actually one that I was going to buy at the last minute. Just as I was about to take it to the counter, I opened it and realized it had a different disc inside it. It was a compilation of New Zealand label from the 1990s, and it looked vaguely interesting, and never seen it before. But anyway, I opened it up, just about to take it to the counter, and yeah, there was that disc wasn't in it, so I left that. One thing I did see was a best of Cat Stevens album, not this one. Now there are a lot of different greatest hits compilations of Cat Stevens. I guess the most famous one is the one that's got the picture of I think it's from a few of his albums have got a similar artwork, but particularly the one I think it's Teaser and the Fire Cat. If you've seen the cover art for that, it's the boy with the cat. Well, there's another picture. I think it might be in the liner notes for that, and the boy is pointing up at I think a moon, and the cat's next to him, and that's on the front of one of the greatest hits collections. That's the one you see around the most. That was from the mid late 90s, I believe. Then there was another greatest hits released, and the cover album of that is really horrific. It's like blue and white, and it's got this kid, like a photograph of a kid, like a real life, not an illustration of a kid who's surrounded by. I can't even remember. That was the one that was in the shop, and I've seen it before, and it's just really awful album art to be choosing to put on the cover of an album, greatest hits or otherwise. I was just trying to search. Here it is. This one here. That one there. I'm showing it. Remember Cat Stevens, the Ultimate Collection, and it's got. We can't even actually see what, like a mountain and a waterfall and a city, and there's a kid with a bowl cut looking up. Just an awful choice. The other one I was talking about is just before is that one there. That's the one that you see around a lot. The very best of Cat Stevens. Is another one. I've never seen that one before. That's an interesting choice. This is the one that I have, obviously, the one I'm showing here. So this is the one I saw today. And it was really the only thing that was kind of, I thought like if I didn't have this, I would have picked that up. But I have had this for a long time. So I owned that other one I just showed. I owed that back in the early 2000s. So I like Cat Stevens, and I guess the same way everyone else likes him is that his music has just kind of always been there. When growing up, it was the kind of thing you heard on the radio, or maybe your parents played it. What else you could say about his music? It's quite pretty, quite beautiful. I find his music. So we look at what we have on this particular one. Moon Shadow, Father and Son, Morning is Broken. So three there. Three, I use that word beautiful, but they are quite beautiful songs, aren't they? I think I've talked about this before about when I was at school, at primary school, in primary school meaning elementary school. We used to sing songs in class, the different kinds of songs they would get you to sing. Sometimes it would be kid songs. But I remember one particular year, they got us to, I think I've talked about this before maybe on another video, they got us to sing Morning is Broken, which seems like a very strange choice to get a choir of children to sing. Because it's got quite a high, the start of the song, it's like a kind of like a falsetto, morning, and I can't imagine kids would have sung that very well. Wild World, I don't like that song. First Cut is the deepest. Lady Darwinville. Matthew and Son. For a long time, that was one of my favorite songs of his, which is kind of quite different than his other. The music he's more well known for. Like I heard again, it's kind of like someone would ask you, when was the first time you heard that song, and you can't actually remember because it's just always been there. It's just kind of around you, his music. And I'm not sure if that's the same in every country. He's British, so I don't know how well he did in America, and whether I'm sure his music is as well known there as anywhere else. But certainly in New Zealand, it's just one of those bands, or one of those artists, I should say, that is just there. If I turn on the radio and listen to a couple of stations within the next 2 hours, you could almost guarantee you'd hear one of the songs on this greatest hits compilation played on the radio. But what I was saying about Matthew and Son is that the first time I heard that, and then not the first time I heard it, through my life when I heard it, I knew that song. It just kind of sounded like a typical '60s song, late 60s song, and then I heard other stuff, like Peace Train or whatever, and I can't remember when I first realized it was the same person, because Matthew and Son just doesn't sit together with the other kind of music that he's produced. It's not as like I guess folky. It's not as folky. What else? Remember the days of the old school yard. Where do the children play? Could always take or leave that one. Again, quite a pretty song, but and the thing that kind of also made me want to talk about this is that song Peace Train. They actually have a book. They made a children's book of Peace Train. Like, well, with it says by Cat Stevens, I think some other writer there together, and they kind of made it into like a story. And then on the side of the book, you push a button, and or maybe there's a CD with. I remember there being some kind of like audiotronic kind of apparatus on the side of the book where you push the button and it kind of reads or sings along with the song. And I got that from the library for my son a couple of years ago now. He would have probably been younger than 5. He was probably still at kindergarten. And he's always remembered that. He always brings it up. Just the other day, he just kind of brought up, he goes, oh, what did he say? I can't remember. He said, he basically asked, oh, do you know Cat Stevens? Like, kids don't remember where they first heard things. So in his brain, he's got that song, Peace Train, and the singer, Cat Stevens. But he obviously can't remember that we listened to it together, or I read him the book about it. He just thinks, oh. And he asked me, oh, do you know Cat Stevens? I was like, yeah, remember we read that book? He was like, oh. And apparently his teacher was talking about it as well. But he's brought it up a few times over the last 2 years. He'll just like, oh, remember that? Or do you know this song? Or can you play that song? Or, and when I was younger, I liked that song as well. I don't know why. His music's got a kind of a different feeling to it. It's got almost like a how can I put it? Like he's Greek ethnically, Cat Stevens. His birth name is was it Stephen Georgiosios? Hang on, I'm looking here. Oh, Stephen Demeter, or was it Demeter? That's one of the Greek gods' names, isn't it? Demeter. Giorgio. Stephen Giorgio. Like, what's his name? George Michael is also Greek. He was born in London. Okay, so his father's Cypriot, so obviously Greek Cypriot. His dad's name is Stavros Giorgio, and a Swedish mother. So okay, so his heart's. But what I was going to say is, in his music, there's a kind of a aspect or a sound that sounds like it comes from another musical lineage, not of the typical American and British folk of the 60s and 70s, that you can kind of hear that where that's come from, through kind of traditional, especially Celtic music, Irish and Scottish and whatnot. But when I hear Cat Stevens' music, it certainly has that, but it also has something else to it. Like something Mediterranean, and that could be the Cypriot Greek thing, or it could be something else completely. I don't know what it is, and maybe it's just my brain, or my imagination. It's not really there, but it's certainly something I've always kind of thought. So obviously, the story of Cat Stevens is kind of interesting. Is that he converted to Islam in the 70s and kind of gave up music, at least for a period there. And I've read a few different things. I remember I read a book, would have been about 20 years ago. And the story in the book was that he was swimming in California. And this is why he was famous. And he got into trouble, like, on the tide was pulling him out, or the waves were too big, or, he was tired and couldn't swim. And he was, obviously struggling, and maybe felt that he wasn't going to make it. And he kind of, in his brain or whatever, in his mind, he prayed or asked God or whoever, if you save me, I promise I'll dedicate my life to you. And I can't remember if after that he managed to get the strength to swim back to shore, or magically a wave came in and kind of pushed him onto the shore. I can't remember that exact part of the story, but I remember reading something like that. But then at the same time, I heard differing things, and it wasn't as though he got back to the shore and then just that day became a Muslim and gave up music. I think it was more gradual after that. I was just scrolling through his Wikipedia, and I saw just in passing, sold 3 million albums in the US on one particular album. So he must have been pretty big if he sold one of his albums, sold 3 million. Okay, so I'm not just going to read his Wikipedia, but just kind of an overview. It says when he was in Marrakesh, which is in Morocco, he was intrigued by the call to prayer, and I thought, music for God. And then, okay, here's the part I heard. Stevens nearly drowned off the coast of Malibu, and said he shouted, "Oh God, if you save me, I will work for you." He stated that immediately afterwards a wave appeared and carried him back to shore. This brush with death intensified his long-held quest for spiritual truth. He had looked into Buddhism, Zen, I Ching, numerology, tarot cards, and astrology. Stephen's brother was a convert to Judaism, and he had bought a copy of the Quran while he was on holiday in Jerusalem, and obviously gave it to Cat Stevens. And then I said I wasn't going to read the Wikipedia, but I kind of am, but that's okay. In a later interview, I actually think I've seen that he was on Desert Island Discs. I don't know if anyone here listens to Desert Island Discs, which is a BBC show where they bring on famous people, basically, of many different fields: art, literature, politics, entertainment, everything. And they get them to pick 6 or 7 songs that if they were stuck on a desert island and they could only listen to these songs, they're kind of the most important songs of their life, what would they be? And then they can also pick a book as well. I actually think I did listen to his one. I go through them regularly and just pick out the ones of people I'm interested in. I don't listen to all of them, but there's been some good ones I've listened to over the years. He said on that, "I would never have picked up the Quran myself as a free spirit. I was more aligned to my father's Greek Orthodox beliefs." But his brother's timely gift was quickly absorbed and was taken with its content, soon beginning his transition and conversion to Islam, which would change forever his private and professional life. He converted in 1977, taking the name Yusuf Islam. And he discontinued his pop career, though he was persuaded to perform after a 25-year musical hiatus. And he does. I'd say it was about yeah, it would have been, they say 25 years. It would have been the early 2000s. You kind of started to see him more getting interviewed and stuff, because it seemed like there was a period there in the 90s when I first became aware of who Cat Stevens was, beyond just hearing his music in passing. I mean, there was kind of this mystery around him. Oh, yeah, he converted to Islam, and, no one's ever seen him again, kind of like that way. But I don't know how true that was, but certainly you didn't really hear or see much of him in the media. But then somewhere around the early 2000s, there did start he did start getting covered in the media more, and I know he's released music subsequently, and now he bills himself, I think, as um, Yusuf Islam / Cat Stevens. Was for a long time, I think he completely rejected um, the whole idea of being like kind of a musician. So it says he returned to music in up to 2006 as Yusuf Islam, and then just as Yusuf / Cat Stevens. And he tours. He tours, and I assume he performs his, yeah, okay, it says he is performing Peace Train at the, okay, I didn't even know this. I wasn't living in New Zealand at the time. There's a picture here of him. It says Yusuf performing Peace Train at the National Remembrance Service for the victims of the Christchurch mosque shootings in Hagley Park, Christchurch, in 2019. So if you don't know, there was a pretty horrific attack on 2 mosques in Christchurch, which is a city in the South Island of my country, New Zealand, in 2019. And I think about 50 people were killed, murdered, and what can you say about that other than it's just absolutely awful? Like, I think it kind of shook this country in a very kind of I guess when things like that happen, it kind of makes a country look at itself, and can kind of I don't know, kind of take away some confidence as a nation. I was living in South Korea when not a similar thing, but I was living in South Korea when there was a ferry disaster in 2014. It was called the Sewol. The Sewol ferry sunk on its way, and it had a few hundred high school kids on it, and 250 of them died. And a lot of like the survivors, a lot of them were adults, and the people left on the ferry were almost all kids, overwhelmingly teenage kids. And the captain of the ship abandoned ship. He was one of the first to get off, and then the Coast Guard didn't do anything. The rescue attempt was just a chaotic disaster. And I was living in Korea at that time, and I felt what I imagined, because I wasn't living in New Zealand when that terrorist attack happened in 2019, but I imagine it was a similar kind of thing. I felt the same thing in Korea, where people just kind of like didn't know what to do as a country. Like, yeah, like I said, kind of taken away confidence. Kind of like people looked at it and said, well, if we could let this happen, then there must be something majorly wrong with who we are as a country and a society. That's kind of like what you felt at a national level, people were saying to themselves, and at a personal level. And I think maybe, I hope, is what people felt here in New Zealand. Because it was shocking. Anyway, Cat Stevens, getting back to Cat Stevens, he came and performed at the Remembrance Service, which was quite cool. I had no idea that he had done that. I've really rambled there about all sorts of stuff, and I know it's probably not particularly interesting, but maybe if you don't know Cat Stevens, I might have provided some sort of introduction to him and his work. I think you can't really go wrong with anything by him. I've listened to a lot of his early albums. It's more of his 70s stuff, like Tea for the Tillerman and was it Tease of the Firecat and so on and so forth. And I there's not like there's no bad songs on them. There are some that are better than others, but he's a pretty great musician in my opinion. Catch Bull at 4. Is that the one that has I was going to say, is that the one that has no, it's not. Anyway, I'm running out of time here, so we'll leave it there. A pretty common secondhand CD to find in the shops, because he was and is a beloved artist and many people owned his stuff, and so therefore you find it around places where people maybe don't want their collections anymore. Cat Stevens, Yusuf Islam, Stephen, what was it? Stephen Giorgio. All right. Thank you for watching.